Now, I'm sure you guys have noticed things have been really quiet over at Undead Labs. We haven't heard anything about State of Decay 3 in close to a year. And unless you count a dozen or more layoffs, which was announced by a developer at Undead Labs some months ago, which we never even got an official statement on, by the way, you would almost feel like, is everything okay over there? Are they still making the game? I mean, that's kind of the question I tend to have when it's been this silent for so long. But surprisingly, we have some really good news, but also some not so good news about the release date that makes me cringe a little bit, to say the least, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But let's start with the good stuff, and we're gonna get this out of the way first. Back around 2 months ago, Brand Fitzgerald, the current developer at Undead Labs, wrote on a Reddit post around August responding to people wanting to hear news about State of Decay 3. He says, "All I will say is that our daily progress is amazing." And a further response, he goes on to say, "We are close to flooding the channels with great stuff. I hope y'all will stick around." I actually wanted to report this sooner, but I was hoping we would see this news in action. Now guys, when I actually first saw this, I was happy as heck. Coming off the silence from this past Xbox showcase, I predicted a long time ago we would see this game possibly as early as 2025, and clearly that is not going to happen at this point. And so I was like, all right, finally, here we go. We're about to hear some news. But it's actually been 2 months since he wrote this on this Reddit post back in August. There's been no news since, as far as I know, but I have to say I still think this is a good thing overall. Clearly Brant wouldn't say something like this if he felt they didn't have some really cool stuff to showcase. Now let me provide some further context as to maybe why we haven't heard of anything, even though he said we would. In a very recent Reddit post within actually the last few days of me making this video, someone asked, "Why are you not allowed to discuss information?" Now keep in mind, before Xbox acquired Undead Labs, they actually used to kind of share information all the time. Maybe they'd even overpromise and kind of mess up in that way, but now they can't do that because Microsoft and basically their overlords down at Xbox, they're just not going to let that happen. And let me paraphrase a little bit of what Brand says in response. He essentially says Microsoft can't just let them get news out without really interfering with other games in their lineup, and the messaging needs to be clear and it needs to be all from one source. And in another response, he says we can't post anything about State of Decay 3. It's not our desire because they are not in charge as in Undead Labs of the messaging, so they can't say anything because Xbox itself is basically the ones in charge. Now the thing with this is that it's not just Xbox worrying about their own studios and their messaging, and you don't really want to drop news about State of Decay 3 when, for example, maybe they are about to drop some news about Call of Duty, or another maybe competitor might drop some news and interfere with the spotlight that Undead Labs and State of Decay 3 could receive. So basically, they're like, that's kind of what it is. There's a lot of red tape involved. And if you actually look up Brand's past responses, they actually all echo these same sentiments. And in all my years of kind of covering other gaming companies and other entities like that, this pretty much holds true, and he's correct. Ultimately, the news here is that they have info that they really want to flood to us. I have no clue what that is. If I had to guess, maybe some development updates, maybe a new trailer could pop up. That'd be really cool, but you don't typically see new trailers out of nowhere on a random November for a game, you know, from Xbox, because you typically save those for really big gaming conventions. We do have the Game Awards coming really soon, but Xbox typically doesn't participate with big announcements at this, though Marvel's Blade in 2023 was announced there. So I mean, anything's possible, but I would be very, very surprised. We also have January's Xbox Developer Direct, but again, you don't really get new announcements of games, or if you do, they're smaller ones. You don't get those bigger reveals, but they do show, you know, a lot of gameplay of games that are coming up next year in Xbox's lineup, which at the moment is not State of Decay 3 as far as we know. But again, I mean, anything is possible either way. Let's hope we see this flood of information soon. I would be happy with just screenshots, developer blogs on what they are working on with State of Decay 3, maybe a tease of new maps, vehicles, guns. Maybe we can see survivors grow beards. Do they want to tease some beards? That would be really cool. I'd be happy with that. I'd be happy with a fart in the wind, for Christ's sakes, regarding State of Decay 3, but you guys know it's very complicated, as you can tell. Either way, let's hope we get to hear some news from Brand and the team over at Undead Labs. Anything would be really cool, and hopefully we get to be flooded here really soon. With that, it's not all good news for State of Decay 3. We did get some bad news. So before I say the bad news, I do want to preface this by saying this isn't official, but this did come from an insider who does, by all accounts, have a source somewhere within Undead Undead Labs, and he has broke inside information before regarding the game. Before that you know, no one else knew. So he's been on the money. Now, a few weeks ago, Jez Corden over at Windows Central responded to someone who asked about State of Decay 3 and its release date. And he writes, State is in 2027 and is considered a hero project. I want to say I actually am not sure what that means, but I'll touch on that in a second. And then he says, I don't know if that matters much to Amy Hood's projections. She doesn't care what damage canceling games does to Xbox. And I'll talk about that last part in a second as well. But yeah, he's basically saying that State of Decay 3 is coming in 2027. And boy, that is really surprising. I'm not gonna lie. I've been projecting 2026 for this game. I'm not sure, and maybe I have if I've told you guys when in 2026. Basically, I've always hoped, or I pretty much predicted that the trailer would come at the Xbox showcase. And then later we would see the release date at the end of the year. So basically the timeline would be the Xbox showcase in summer of 2026, typically June, with a release date hopefully in October and November of 2026. And that's what I've been predicting and feeling really good about, and really just adamant that I think that could be the date. And a good example of what I'm talking about is with Outer Worlds 2. This exact scenario played out. They played the trailer that was showing the release date in summer, and then they're releasing it here really soon. And in my head, to hear that this gets pushed to 2027, I'm like, oh boy, if it's 2027, all I can do is pray that it's early 2027, because again, the first trailer appeared in 2020, for Christ's sakes. This franchise isn't GTA, it's not Fallout, it's not Elder Scrolls. To see that and know that they've been working on this game for 7 years is mind-blowing. Again, there's been talks about this game in some kind of production in 2019, so this is kind of blowing my mind to say the least. But in the same breath, Jez did write they consider this a hero project, whatever that is. Well, I mean, that can't be bad, right? I'm assuming a hero project in this context means that they feel State of Decay is a potential system mover, like it could sell consoles type of thing. It's a potential game that can draw and really be a staple franchise within Xbox's portfolio, and I believe it. I absolutely believe it, because there's no game out there exactly like State of Decay. This just doesn't exist. A PvE survival game that's, you know, really good, really nice, really great graphically, at least, you know, for its time. There's nothing like this out there that's not a PvP game, or that's not just killing zombies and you're on a Rails game. Now, he also said that it's gotten additional funding, which is interesting considering they just laid off people recently, but that's a whole different subject. So I'm assuming a hero project is a really good thing, and more money means we don't have to be scared about a cancellation, because you don't throw more money at things you don't believe in. But if you haven't heard the news, Xbox has raised console prices. They've raised Xbox Game Pass to $30, which is suicidal. And of course, all the recent layoffs. And a hero project or not, to hear 2027 can't be a good thing. And even though there is that good news, there's still people's fear there that legitimately that this game could be canceled. I mean, that's a real fear people are gonna definitely just go towards, knowing that this might not release until 2027. I won't get into more of that Xbox news, and truth be told, I'm not an authority in that subject or in that space, but it's a literal dumpster fire at Microsoft, and that's not, I feel like, a good thing, a confidence builder to feel good about Undead Labs and State of Decay 3. So hearing that the game's coming out at a later date just doesn't drive a lot of confidence. We want to hear that this is coming out a little sooner than that, but it is what it is. Let's hope Undead Labs comes through with State of Decay 3, and that info that Brant was talking about, that flooded news, can come here pretty soon. With that, to be clear, and not to make this a long-winded video, I know why I think this game might not be in 2027. I'm going to be real quick here. If you saw my last video, I reported Undead Labs lost over a dozen people. I think my estimates were around 16 to 18 people got fired, and a few months ago, Brant over at Undead Labs had an interesting Reddit post explaining the troubles that Undead Labs has had with development setbacks. He states indecision's been a big play, including a lot of turnover from COVID, doubling the size, which made organizing stressful, layoffs, which I've already talked about, and potentially having to outsource work to other places. He did mention in the same post, we are ultimately to blame for the length that this has taken. So I want to show you guys that, because it's me giving you guys context from an actual developer and not just taking my word. This is stuff that I've known before as someone who's been paying attention and covering this game for 4 years now, as in State of Decay 3, including this headline that I'm going to flash here on the screen. This has been a big thing everything that's happened within the last, years as well. But it's one thing for me to say it's another coming directly from one of the founders of the franchise and current State of Decay 3 developer in Brant. So bless him for being awesome and being transparent. With that, let's hope they are still cooking and they're making something good, because let's be honest, I feel like the more this takes to hear news about the game, the more we learn about like not hearing anything about this game and layoffs, the more people get worried and the less people get excited about State of Decay 3. But I could be completely wrong about that. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.